Michael, good morning. How are you doing today?
Yeah, great. Good morning, Simon.
Good. Thanks for joining and making time in your busy schedule. Bit of a damp and gloomy day today, but I think you mentioned it. Are you off to Spain at the end of the week? Is that right? Anywhere
I
nice?
am going to Ibiza on Friday night. Yes,
Oh,
cannot wait.
lovely. Okay, fantastic. For the whole week, or is it half term, maybe?
Half term week. Yeah, taking the kids. Got a nice villa
Okay.
booked. Yeah, happy days.
Oh, sounds great. Sounds great. Escaping this doom and gloom. I like it. Okay, well, look, thanks for joining. Look, the title of today's episode is Scaling EMEA ARR Insights from a Three Times General Manager of Europe. Okay.
Mm.
Obviously for people that haven't tuned into these episodes before, the series is called Pod Leaders. What I'm looking to do is invite sort of thought leaders and leadership profiles across the software and marketing tech industry to discuss sort of hard hitting topics within that area. My name's Simon Gregory. I'm a director of Thornton Gregory. We're a recruitment company that focuses on this particular area. And over the last 10 years, we've supported, companies, high growth companies, build their go-to-market talent across EMEA in the US. Last summer we started this episode because over the 10 years that I've been in the space, I've kind of got to know loads of really, really cool people like Michael. And just thought we could tap into some of those experiences and some of that thought that they've had over their career, just for our mutual audiences. So like really excited to kind of unpack what we've got today. And this sort of really interesting topic and obviously the background that you represent. The other thing, for people that haven't seen it, we're across all the kind of social channels, but, we're looking at revenue leadership, go to market kind of topics like this. I've also decided to look at like RevOps, sales enablement, things, best practice around customer success and professional services, and even regional stuff around, we had a guest the other week, which will be launched soon, around building teams in the German speaking market, the DAC, which I thought was quite cool and represents a challenge for some of the clients and prospects and people that I talk to. I guess the reason I wanted to invite Michael specifically is because, as the title sort of dictates, I was really keen to kind of find somebody that had built high growth businesses really from the ground up. I think that experience is obviously totally unique to them, but offers loads of amazing insights into probably the do's and don'ts. That's why I thought when I sort of bumped into Michael fairly recently, that he would be perfect for this type of episode. So again, thanks for taking the time to do this. Michael, look, for the people that don't know you, and for the listeners that are just kind of tuning in, would you mind just bringing people up to date with your sort of career today and a little bit about your story?
Happy to. Yes. Well, look, thanks for having me firstly, Simon. Happy to help however I can. And if anyone's listening and gets any value from this, then I'm really, really happy to have contributed in some small way. So look, the short story is I've been in and around the MarTech and e-commerce space for 20 years now, which when I say it is actually quite unbelievable. But I'll give you the sort of beginning to where I am now as in a shorter space of time. I actually started my career back in 1998 in classified ad sales. So I was one of the people that left university at the time. If you wanted to get into sort of the media space, as it was called then, it was sort of really pre software sales being the thing. You either went one or two routes. You either went into media planning or you went into basically media sales. And very quickly I worked out that I was not a media planner. I had lots of friends that worked at agencies, that kind of stuff, having a great time, but it just wasn't me. And I spent the first 2 years of my career in media sales, and it was the most unbelievable hardcore training in really how to become a seller. And this was the old days. Like really, none of us had the internet. None of us had a CRM tool. We had absolutely zero help externally, apart from just the most amazing training programs that we got put into. And it was just a great grounding for me in terms of how to actually sell product. 2 years in, I realized I didn't want to stay in media. I wanted to get into software. That was kind of kicking off. And I was lucky enough to get a gig at one of the early email service providers, as they were called back in the day, ASPs, now campaign orchestration, sounds much better. And
Yep.
I was working for a company called eCircle for about 5 years. I worked there up until, I want to say, 2008, roughly that sort of time. Then I moved over to a company called Web Trends. Some of the listeners on here will remember that name.
Yep.
It was the original web analytics tool, and had an absolutely amazing time there. Was there for another 5 years. Really, really great period in my career as an AE, and made that transition into being a sales director, which was really, really wonderful. Then I was lucky enough to be asked to start a company called Bloomreach. I was first man on the ground, 2013, built the team underneath me, spent about 7.5 years at Bloomreach, and just had the best time. Really, really wonderful part of my career. Finished at Bloomreach in roughly 2020, the end of 2020, and then was asked to start another startup, very, very well-funded startup called Fast in the payment space. Some people on the pod will know that name very, very well, because it had a very interesting ending, which maybe we can touch on. Stayed at Fast for 18 months. Sadly, that company did go out of business, as I'm hinting at. But I think I probably learned more in that period of time than at any point in my career. As you can imagine, a lot went on. And then for the last couple of years, I've been the general manager at a company called Narvar, which is not a startup, but sits in that point between e-commerce and supply chain. So very much sort of servicing a similar client set that I've been looking at to date. So yeah, I've done quite a bit, and loved every minute of it. And yeah, happy to help however I can, Simon.
Yeah, great. You touched upon some of those bits there. I mean, it sounds like you had a really great time in most of those roles, lots of learning. So do you feel like there are any real key milestones across your career? And if so, like, what were they and why?
I think there's a couple that I would call out. I think, look, for anybody who's in sales leadership, or even in sales as an AE, I think the first period of time where you really start to understand what it takes to be an enterprise seller is a really, really critical point in anybody's career. Sales is hard. Often from the outside in, people think it's a lot easier than it actually is. And I think when you really, truly start to understand the role and how you can craft business and create something from nothing, it's a really, really, really empowering feeling. So I think for me, that period was when I was at Web Trends. I was probably in my late 20s at the time. And yeah, it was a really, really formative period in my career, and definitely some of the lessons learned there I've taken forward. So that would be one. And then I think the other major point in my career was when we realized that Bloomreach was going to make it from a startup. It pivoted a few times during during the first 3 to 5 years, and there was a certain point, probably 5-6 years in, that we thought, yeah, this company is going to make it. They're probably going to IPO at some point. Still hasn't happened, but they're very much on track to do that. And I think, again, for me, realizing that you can create something out of nothing, it's just a wonderfully rewarding experience. So I'd say those two things are the things that I come back to a lot, and I sort of have set me up for the career I've had so far.
Yeah, it's really cool. The Bloomreach, so such a long time at Bloomreach, and such a lot of growth and scale. I mean, we've spoken off air about some of the numbers, but it's really impressive, like really, really impressive in terms of headcount and like local ARR. So that must have been a fairly unique, incredible kind of fairy tale almost when you look back on it, really. Talk to us a little bit more about that. And I'm also interested, just to dovetail into that, is how did you come across Bloomreach and get introduced? Is that a network thing, or just, I'd be really curious about that.
Yeah, well, I'll start there because then I'll tee up the story. So
yeah, thanks.
Look, I think Now I'm a little bit older and my network is certainly a lot bigger. I'm fortunate enough that I know a lot of recruiters like yourself. I know a lot of the investment community, and it's a slightly different way that you can approach looking for the next role. But certainly back then, back in 2013, that's a while back now. I was approached to talk to Bloomreach originally via a recruiter, but that recruiter was based in California. Okay, so again, quite unusual. I mean, the recruitment bit is not out of the ordinary, but it is out of the ordinary to be approached by a recruiter who's based in the States. And the reason they knocked on my door originally was because for the probably the 3 years prior to that at Web Trends was selling analytics and optimization software to everybody, banking, finance, travel, retail, you name it. And what I had decided to do was really specialize in e-commerce and retail. So I'd carved out a bit of a name for myself, selling Web Trends products to the retail community. And that had become noticed, I guess, externally. And the recruiter came directly to me because of that, and because they knew some of the companies that I've been working with. And Bloomreach at the time was very, very much focused on selling to the largest and the biggest e-commerce companies in the UK and North America. And they wanted someone to crack the UK market, open it up. And so they came direct to me, and that was really how the approach happened. So pretty fortuitous, and it was a competitive recruitment process. They decided to hire me, first time doing a startup, first time being first man on the ground. So a risk for them, definitely a risk for me. And I remember actually talking to my wife. This company approached me. I'm not quite sure about it. What do you think? They didn't even really have a website. I mean, if you can believe that nowadays.
Really?
I mean, even in 2013, not having a good website was a bit unusual, but it was like a holding page with a few product pages. It was very, very basic. So it didn't look like a legit company, but I took the chance and went from there. Sorry, I'll put my hand up here, Simon. Just
No worries.
remind me what the second part
No
of the
worries.
question.
So that was the first bit. Yeah, sorry, it was two questions in one, which is bad on my part. The second bit was just about the experiences of the 7 years that you were there. Right. Yeah.
So to address how the experience went, look, it was a wild ride. I think for anybody that's worked in tech, particularly e-commerce or martech, 7 to 8 years can feel like a long time. A lot can happen in that period of time in software, as you know. And look, there were points definitely where we weren't sure if it was going to work. But I think if I look at sort of that linear graph, some companies show, well, what happened when we were founded to now? If I describe it in that sort of way, we went to market originally with the idea that we were going to go out there and win the biggest retailers on earth. Okay, so the US team had done a really, really good job with a product that doesn't really exist anymore, actually, but at the time it was pretty revolutionary. They were selling an organic search product that effectively large retailers would pay for. And you'd sort of say this to people and say, hang on, you're paying for organic search? That defeats the whole point of what we're doing. But effectively, the idea that Bloomreach came up with was if you expand your content in a meaningful way that's relevant and can be read by Google, then you expand your reach, therefore you expand your acquisition of traffic, and that is worth paying for because that traffic can be as high quality as PPC. Okay, that was the thesis that Bloomreach was founded on. And we had some unbelievable clients in the States, people like Staples, Neiman Marcus, Lowe's, Target. And when they came to me saying, look, you need to try and start this business out here, obviously we were thinking, okay, well, we'll just follow the same pattern. We're going to go after the biggest of the big. And one of the best things that we did early on was we won Homebase and Argos. They were one of the first customers that we sold. And obviously, if you've got Homebase and Argos, which at the time were linked together, if you remember, then it's really, really meaningful when you're going to go and sell that product to, the other larger organizations in the UK. And that just really, really teed us up. I think the other thing we did really well was we hired smart. We did two things which I think made the difference. We brought one of the most successful AEs over from California.
Okay.
If he's listening, he's still here in London. He's going to become a resident of the UK. He's had an absolutely amazing ride, and he's still at Bloomreach. Well done, Rob.
Cool.
So we did that, and we also had a really, really unique approach to inside sales. I've never seen another company do this, but we employed super, super high quality inside sales SDRs. The type of people that would normally be going to McKinsey or Bain, we convinced them to join Bloomreach. And really the argument was, look, you're going to go to McKinsey or Bain. You might spend 5 years there. You'll work really, really hard. And then a lot of you will end up wanting to work at a startup. So why don't we just shortcut that process and you come and work for the startup straight away? You learn the road, become an SDR for 2 years, and then you can go off into other parts of the business. And at least at that early time at Bloomreach, it worked amazingly well. These guys created unbelievable content that just opened loads of doors. They were unbelievably gifted and had an amazing work ethic. They were credible. They could phone up, literally phone up. It was before the days of outreach. You know, they were obviously using email and the like, but they were on the phone a lot, which I still really passionately believe in. And they were phoning chief digital officers and really senior people at massive companies and getting results and opening the door. It worked so well. So that was great. And so we got a cadre of really, really awesome clients on board. But then, you know, we had some tricky times. That product was not predictable. It was difficult to sell it as proper SaaS revenue. People paid us by the month. And because it was coming from marketing budgets, they wanted to be able to switch it on and off like PPC. So at that point, the business had to pivot. And a lot of people won't know this about Bloomreach, but they were very, very worried about going out of business. We had been for a period of time the fastest growing company in Silicon Valley. We were probably about 25, 30 million at the time. And we knew that we needed to pivot to a proper predictable SaaS revenue model. And that was when we realized we need to build another product. And so we moved into the site search space. It was something that you could sell. You could sell it for 1, 2, 3 years. It was a proper SaaS model. And fortunately, Bloomreach could use all of that AI engine that had powered the organic search to power that. And that, fortunately for us, worked really, really well. The teams did an amazing job of pivoting people off the original product onto site search. I will say it was almost like recreating the company again just to get to the same amount of revenue. But, you know, these are the things that you don't talk about. Lots of people externally, we certainly wouldn't have told that at the time.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
So that was great. Teed us up for the next piece of the journey where we actually went into acquisition mode. Some people may know the story. We decided to get into the content space, and Bloomreach acquired a European-based company called Hippo, which is a content management system based in Amsterdam. And again, you know, that came with a whole different bunch of challenges. You know, how do you merge, you know, two completely different businesses? How do you merge two, you know, completely different cultures? I learned that American business people and Dutch business people tend to clash quite a lot in terms of how they think about things, which was interesting. But look, you know, that took probably a year and a half to kind of work our way through. But the company at that point obviously got from a single product to a platform. We had a range of products we could sell. We were still selling to some of the biggest organizations in the world. And just a really, really great experience all around. And obviously in terms of people and footprint, the European team went from, 20 of us to suddenly we had, 100 plus. Then, having an organization which had a really big footprint in the UK and a really big footprint in mainland Europe. And they've just kicked on from there. Nowadays I look at the team, I'm obviously still in touch with them, and it's hundreds of people in Europe, and they've really motored since I've moved on. So yeah, a great journey.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. You mentioned a couple of the other sort of standout companies. Web Trends, Fast, and Narvar all look slightly different, obviously, in terms of the project. So let's tell us a little bit more about those experiences.
Yeah, I think the web trends before I moved to Bloomreach, when I was really an AE, just a solid grounding. I think for anybody that worked for web trends at that time, um, and there was a real hardcore group of us that are still in touch today. We just had a great mentor. Our leader was old school. He, demanded results. Was very numbers driven. As every sales leader should be. But was just a great grounding, becoming an AE and then a leader. But I think it was at that time where tech had started to change. It was a traditional tech company, a traditional software company. We were still selling on premise to some degree.
Mm.
And the office was out in Staines, M4 corridor. You don't really see that anymore. But a
No.
great grounding. Fast, completely different business. When I left
Yeah.
Bloomreach, the world was changing. Money was still very cheap. But I think, look, Fast, gosh, I learned so much of that business. At the time, people have to remember that Fast was the most exciting tech company, really, certainly in e-commerce, but potentially
Really.
outside of e-commerce as well. It got so much attention. I mean, it literally was a masterclass in how to create a brand out of nothing. This was a company that got Series A of 20 million. Very quickly followed by Series B of an additional 100 million, backed by some of the biggest VCs on earth. Index Ventures, SUSE. One of the biggest of those investors was actually Stripe themselves. It was a
Okay.
serious play in the payment space. And when they came knocking, they said, "Look, we need a leader. We need someone that knows how to build a team and to create something out of nothing." I think from the first interview to actually getting the job offer took 10 days. It was a really quick
Wow.
process.
Yeah.
That gave me a lot of confidence that they believed in me. And look, it was just a completely wild ride. For those of you that know the story, the team, the board, made a lot of mistakes. They hired way too many people way too fast, which was really the main problem. But look, as I say to anybody that asks me the question, I will go to my grave saying that product really should have worked and it should have been around today. It was a one-click checkout. The value prop was so straightforward, but it was an absolutely amazing experience, even if it did fail. And I've learned so many lessons about that and learning when to spot the warning signals when things aren't going
Yeah.
right, and actually speaking up about those things with the board, which isn't always that easy, even in a leadership position. And then look, more recently, Narvar, different stage company, much more mature business, in a very niche part of the industry, doing really, really well. And it was just a really different journey, taking on a team, and really refining it. And, anybody that's led a team through the last 2 years knows that, it has been a really, really challenging time in technology, working out how you can hit the number more, do more with less people, potentially restructuring the team, potentially looking at, your go to market planning, all that stuff, and for me, certainly, looking after all aspects of the business, was a really, really great time.
Was Fast over COVID, timing wise, or
Yeah,
was it?
that's right. Fast was
Yeah.
right in the middle of COVID.
Middle of COVID. Yeah. Okay.
We hired pretty much everybody remotely,
Okay.
and there were very, very few times where we really got the whole team together because it was just at that time. So yeah, it definitely did
Yeah.
have an adverse effect, I think, on how
Yeah.
things ran.
But had obviously a huge impact on e-commerce in general, didn't it? That period. So did that contribute to the pace that Fast was growing?
Yeah, I think it gave some false signals.
Yeah.
A lot of e-commerce players were growing because volume. Most licenses were based on volume usage,
Yeah.
right? So as that volume increased, because everyone was at home, a lot of companies grew without really having to do a lot. If they'd
Mm.
written their contracts correctly, then more volume meant more money. Clients just had to suck it up. It didn't necessarily mean they were getting more revenue from new logos, but it was just every existing contract went from here to here, right? I think because we were launching a company during that time, it probably gave some false signals to the investors and the board in terms of how big fast you become.
Okay.
But they definitely hired too many people too quickly, unfortunately. So yeah,
Okay.
we did it.
We had another guest who spoke extremely fondly about web trends previously. Do you ever work with a guy called Conrad Bennett?
I do know Conrad. Yes, we
Yeah.
worked together for
Okay.
5 years.
Right.
Yes.
He actually spoke about, and maybe it's the same leader. Is it a chap called Nick Sharp? Is that
Nick,
right? Or
that's correct. Yeah.
yeah, he actually spoke for 30 seconds or so about some of the learnings that he personally took from
Yeah.
Mr. Sharp. I don't know him. Yeah. So it's cool. He's obviously had a pretty big impact on both of your careers, among sure many others. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So look, clearly you've got great background, right? And the career trajectory here is undoubted, yeah. But you're surely not short of choice when you come to market, no doubt.
Mm.
You mentioned about fast, maybe about the funding and that compelling reason to join. But are there any particular reasons in your mind why you join the others?
Yeah, I mean, look, funding. I wouldn't say I joined fast because of the funding. That would be
Okay.
not naive of me to say that. I think. Look, for a decent chunk of time, certainly between 2013 to 2020, funding was an indication of confidence that the VC community had in a particular idea or a business. So,
Yeah.
particularly coming in as a leader, it gave you the confidence that you'd have the backing of the board to spend and hire, right? But you've got to be cautious with that. And I think the world has obviously changed massively in the last 3-4 years when it comes to funding in particular. And I think now people have woken up and smelt the coffee. It's also a big weight around the shoulders of a company. There were
Yeah.
organizations in 2020 that took hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of funding, and now with the drive for profitability, if you're a shareholder and you're an employee, you've got to be thinking, well, really, are you ever going to make any money from this business? So I think what I tend to look for is different now than it used to be. I think in the good old days, you'd look to join a company and be looking at your share options and thinking, well, is there a possibility that anything's ever going to happen? Looking back now, you realize actually how rare it is for people to have seen something from an event like that. Obviously Klaviyo is the most recent story where people have made life-changing money, and God knows they deserve it. They've done an unbelievable job. Big software companies like Rubrik as well, they've done amazingly well with their IPO. But obviously IPOs these days are few and far between.
Yeah.
But looking back now, I still don't know that many people that have made it big from selling their shares on a secondary market, what have you. A few people have, and that's great. So I think looking in other areas is key when you take the role. For me personally, what is the CEO's vision like? Can you stand behind that vision, and do you feel that you're going to get the backing of the CEO, particularly if you're going to work in a leadership position? It's absolutely critical, and sometimes it's really, really hard to gauge that during the interview process. You've got to be really, really on the front foot and ask some very, very challenging and inquisitive questions of that leader if you're going to feel that comfort quite early. But for me personally, it's a big one. I think making sure that you understand the other executives that you're going to be working with, particularly if you're a VP of EMEA type role or a GM, understanding who the head of global customer success is, what the responsibilities are going to lie there in terms of who owns what piece of the pie in terms of the revenue, and understanding what responsibilities you're going to have for either growing a team or inheriting a team. If you're growing a team, are you going to get the budget to really, really go out there and hire A players? Who's going to be able to help you with that process? Are you going to be able to use recruiters, or are you going to have to look yourself? Simon, I'm sure you've got the t-shirt on that one. Big debate. We've got an internal recruitment team now.
Yeah.
We're going to go. And of course, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier. Quite often it makes it a lot harder. Sometimes those people are based in the States. I'm thinking about all these things continuously when I'm looking at a role. But I think on the macro level, leads come from anywhere. when I'd left Web Trends, as I said, I was in my late 30s, and I just didn't have the network that I have now. But these days, using the investment community is amazing. You know, most of the large investors, Sequoia, Index, these kinds of people, they have their own internal talent people, and they will probably work with recruiters. But it's always worth reaching out to them and saying, look, you know, here's my experience. I like companies at this stage or that stage in this particular area. Do you have anything that might match up? And you know, they've just got amazing advice and insights. The PE organizations as well can do exactly the same, slightly different focus. You know, they want to invest more in bigger businesses that are more stable potentially, but there's a whole network there. There's some really, really good networks that have been created around VP of EMEA sort of level. It's a newer thing, and I think what I do find funny is some VPs are quite suspicious of sort of speaking to each other because they feel a bit competitive. They might be going for the same gig, but actually, from my experience, over the past 2 or 3 years, it's been really, really rewarding to actually go out there and meet those guys, have lunch with them, swap ideas, and I think you can never really be sure where the next thing will come from. You know, the best roles are often the ones that surprise you, and you think, oh wow, it's left field, but let's look at it. But then I've always been I've been drawn to risky things and things that maybe other people wouldn't.
Yeah. You touched upon there a little bit earlier, you know, clearly 23 and 24 today has been a little bit more challenging in our space, you know, for all the reasons that I'm sure everybody that's tuning in knows, so we don't probably need to labor on that. But what do you feel like good growth in your view for companies looks like in today's market?
I'll give you a simple answer to that one. I think it just has to be predictable, right?
Okay.
In early stage companies, particularly in Europe, volatility is just common, and I think what my experience over the last couple of years has been is that volatility has crept into businesses that are a bit more mature and hadn't had volatility previously. And so for a CRO or a CEO, they just want to be able to see trustworthy, predictable, steady revenue. And it sounds like the most simple thing in the world to drive. And if you're doing all of the right things and driving all the right metrics, yes, you should get there. But the reality has been quite the opposite for many, many leaders and many, many companies. Unfortunately, the conversation I have all too often with peers is that because of the funding and because of the backing that some of these companies may have had, you know, in years gone by, the pressure is still there to hit big numbers. And, you know, there's a gap between the reality of what's possible with the market and the macro factors and what the company wants to achieve. And some sales leaders are kind of stuck in the challenging spot right in the middle of that. So I'd say predictability and just continuity is key.
Yeah, I agree. As somebody that's done this a couple of times in the past, if you were to kind of speak to a foreign, whether that be APAC or US headquartered business that's looking to land in EMEA, brand new venture, how would you personally sort of describe the market opportunity to them?
Well, I think, look, firstly, they probably don't need me to explain how big the opportunity is in firstly, the UK and then Europe as a whole. Look, certainly from a US perspective, the drop-off point for doing international is nearly always landing in some part of the UK or Ireland. Okay, that's a well-trodden path. I think what they struggle with quite often is getting it right in Europe, but they need no persuading that the revenue is there. You've just got to get your go-to-market strategy right. All of my career so far has been with West Coast Silicon Valley-based companies, so I can't speak to working for an APAC-based organization. But look, it's the same argument. There really is no difference. I think with friends and people I know and other companies that come from that part of the world. I think there's maybe a little bit more of a cultural difference that they need to get over, but look, the arguments are the same. You know, there's an enormous TAM in Europe if you get it right. And usually if you get it right in the UK, you can learn the lessons and go from there in, you know, DACH, Nordics, France, Italy, Spain.
So you're still a big believer that UK's first? Because I'm seeing where I'm sat, certainly over the last couple of years, companies beachheading initially in Amsterdam as well. What's your take there in terms of order of events?
I have, speaking to what I have personally done, we've always landed in London, and gone from there, and it's worked for me. Now, yes, I've seen the same, Simon. I've seen companies landing in Amsterdam or Dublin. I have to ask myself the question why they're doing that, and it's probably more from a tax or there's going to be something else driving that decision.
Sure.
But it really depends on the sector that you're in, right? You know, I've worked most of my time in MarTech and e-commerce, and I would argue pretty strongly that the UK market is going to yield you more revenue as a starting point, as a drop-off point, than in any other part of Europe, particularly Benelux, right? But that's not to say it's different with other sectors. You know, if you're looking at selling into the B2B space or manufacturing, it isn't the UK. You know, Benelux and Germany are where it's at. So I think it is sector dependent. But the other argument is, where's the talent? Where's the best talent lie? You know, my number one piece of advice for anybody that is landing here or looking to build a team or a VP or a younger VP of sales that's doing it for the first time and is the first person on the ground, look to where your best talent pool is. And, you know, the reality is UK is probably number one, closely followed by the Nordics and Germany.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. Setting expectations is obviously a big part of any regional leader. How do you personally go about doing that correctly with your leadership in other regions or board?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And I've had both sides to this. I've had worked with leaders and CEOs where we've had an unbelievably good relationship and there is feedback is gratefully received. And I've had a situation where that really was not the case, and it's challenging. So I think my advice is you've got to judge it early as best you can, right? But in the interview process, when you're probing and asking the questions of your potential employer, you've got to be asking them how they feel about receiving the feedback that you can offer them as hopefully the expert in region, in seat, that has done it before and has got the experience and got the t-shirt, because what they've done in wherever the kind of founding region is may not work over here. And I think you will get a sense of that hopefully early on before you've even joined the company, but it can be really, really challenging, Simon. You know, some personalities just don't want to hear it. Some organizations have got a very, very fixed view on the go-to-market strategy. They may have a fixed view on, you know, salary ranges or, you know, whatever the thing is that can restrict your ability to operate. But I think my rule of thumb has always been the same, and that is aim to build a team in region, whether you're in Amsterdam or UK or Nordics or wherever you are, that can be as independent as and autonomous as you can possibly get, whilst also working within the inevitable matrix framework that you may have for the different departments you can. So basically what I mean is be as independent as you can and make as many of your own decisions as you can, to the point at which you then need help from outside. So that help may be from customer support or customer success or, you know, engineering, whatever it may be. But you need to have that trust of the leadership team wherever they are to do that.
I know you're a highly experienced executive now, so you've probably got the confidence to do it. Did you feel like maybe you asked enough difficult questions when you were screening jobs in your early career?
Oh no, definitely not. No, because you don't know what you don't know, and I
Yeah,
think as a younger sales leader, really your only focus is net new revenue. You know, you're sort of programmed into, well, I was an AE, now I'm a sales leader. You know, you can be quite tunnel vision on that, and yeah, I definitely didn't know what questions to ask, and I probably wasn't confident enough to work as a partner with other leaders in the business until I'd got a few years under my belt. So
yeah,
yeah, I
fair.
definitely have learned a lot. I mean, look, it's still not easy. It is still not easy
No,
to do it, even as an experienced tenured VP. Sometimes it can be challenging to work with various characters wherever they may be, but that's just life, isn't it? That's business.
yeah, agreed. I think the most recent Martech chief Martech from the day they did the other week was like 14,000 vendors,
Mm.
all of which obviously have some marketing spin, all of which say they're great. So yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it, to really kind of, you can look at certain metrics and indicators, but you're right. It's probably until you sit in the seat, sometimes it's difficult to really be 100% or 110% confident. It is what it
Yeah,
proclaims to
look,
be
you're gonna get a
sometimes.
feel. Like people always talk about like metrics is at the top of everybody's list of things that you've got to be over, even more than it used to be, particularly with all the new technologies that we have and all of the ways in which we measure reps performance. But I think that subjectivity is talked about less these days, and the feel that you have when you join a new company, uh, in terms of what you think about the value prop, what you think about the industry, what you really feel about the potential success that a company may have. I think people need to really trust their gut and their instinct as a business person. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm a bit more entrepreneurial than others who've worked at later stage companies. Um, but for me, that's a big part of it. I've got to really, really believe in the vision and the mission.
Yep.
Otherwise you're just working at a company, chugging away. And to me, that's not as interesting.
Yeah, sure. Culture is obviously extremely important in early stage companies.
Hmm.
And as the leader of the region, I'm sure you have a unique way of building that. What's your viewpoint, and how do you build that to the best of your ability?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about unique, but hopefully I've done it. I've done an okay job.
Positively unique. Positively unique.
um, So yeah, look, I do. I must say, building teams is probably the favourite thing of the journey that I like to do. Particularly when you look back and you realise that you did create something from nothing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I am fortunate. I've done it twice now. Um, I think look, the lessons that I've learned are, gosh, if you're first man on the ground or first woman on the ground, or building something where there really are very little resources around you, you have got to be the number one skill you have to drive is you've got to be the best um, vision creator and seller of that value prop to the outside audience as possible. You've got to be world class at persuading somebody that the thing you're building and the product that you're selling and the problem that you're solving is so good and so exciting that this candidate cannot possibly look at another opportunity and think it's a better one. So that, before we've even looked at what their experience may or may not be,
Yeah.
they're not already desperate to join your company. There's kind of no point. And I've really kind of majored on that, and I still do with any recruitment that I do. But when you're building that initial team, it's critical because you've got to be you've got to be like a lamp in the garden at night time, just shining really brightly and getting all the moths in the garden to come to
Yeah.
you, because it just makes your life so much easier. If you've got a queue of people outside the door, you can then take your time to pick the very, very best candidates that are out there. And look, fortunately, I had that in both occasions. Like Bloomreach was well known for being fast growing and exciting. And back in 2013, we were doing stuff with machine learning and AI before people talk about AI now. We were doing very, very early stuff back then. And fast, they kind of made my job easy in a way because the brand was
Yeah.
blowing up and everybody knew about it. I probably had 10 people approach me on LinkedIn to work for the European team at Fast every day. It was crazy.
Really?
Um,
Wow.
so creating that hype around the team that you're building, critical. I think also taking on, if you can do it, like I said, we did it at Bloomreach, taking on board someone who's been in the company for a while, potentially from the States or wherever the company is based. That's smart. I spoke to a company the other day. They also had done that. They brought 2 reps from the States over to the UK, and it works incredibly well. Not everyone can do it. There's obviously visas and issues like that, which can cause problems. But I would say if you want to sort of build a go-to-market strategy really, really quickly with experience of people who've already done it for somebody in a different region, that's a great idea. And then look, hire to the cultural values that your company is pushing out there, which, look, I think we're British. We find this stuff sometimes quite hard to swallow. But I think if you really buy into it, and if you really hire to the cultural values that you want to exude, it really, really helps you. And I don't mean that in a cheesy way. Every tech company particularly has, the values page, and there's usually 4 or 5 of them, and they're all pretty similar. But what I mean by that is the European arm of any software business will have a culture in and of itself that is ever so slightly nuanced from the mothership. And I think if you can work out what that is or what you want that to be very, very early on, it will stand you in good stead for years and years and years. So at Bloomreach, we worked out very early on what kind of company we wanted to be, how we wanted to represent ourselves in the market. We had a sense of humor. We were quite eccentric. We challenged people's thinking. We weren't afraid to really be searingly honest with clients. And I still get large customers today that I'm in touch with talk to me about the good old days at Bloomreach and the culture and the way in which we presented that business to the wider market. And I think honestly that lasted the whole time that I was there, because everybody that joins the business thinks in that way. And then when they're hiring people, because as a VP you can't hire every single person yourself, you're involved, but it's not always your sole decision. But if you do that the right way, the culture starts to seep into every piece of the business, and people will hire like-minded people, and so it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. But it is hard. You really need to put the effort in. You really do need to put the effort in.
Yeah, it's like the A players won't allow anything but A players. It's that kind of force magnifier analogy, isn't it? Yeah, no, that's really cool. Bit of an ambiguous question, but if you had a completely blank sheet of paper, no budget restrictions around resources and monetary value, right? Now you've done this a few times. How would you kind of allocate your initial resources in your go-to-market team for Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was thinking about that one earlier on. I think look, I'm just a big fan of doing more with less. So that's sort of before I've even started to sketch out the design.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, gosh, don't hire too many people, because the last thing you want to do is have a team of people where only 7 out of 10 are really, really productive or busy.
Yeah.
So every fiber in my body is thinking, be lean and just do more as individuals. So that's my kind of my macro thinking. But I think I've said it a couple of times already. If I could get somebody over from HQ to be a part of my commercial team from day one, I would do that every time, because not only will they be delivering themselves as long as we can teach them the local market and the local brands, but they are the in-house enabler for any new commercial people that you bring on to the team. So I would definitely do that again. It was fantastic. I think in terms of outreach, you've got to set the tone early. There's all sorts of big debates right now about whether SDR teams are, going to be around for much longer, which is pretty controversial. There's some amazing technology. Do we need SDRs? Should we use AI? If you have SDRs, how do we measure them? Look, I am old school in nature. We talked about my time at Web Trends. We talked about Nick Sharp, the great leader that
Yep.
worked there. The advice he gave is still true today. You know, it is about hard yards and effort, and phoning people still works, guys. Like, it still works. Trust
Newsflash.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think creating a culture where the SDR team believe that, but also understand that they're going to need to work very, very closely with the AEs, and the AEs need to be doing the outreach as well. Like, set that tone from the beginning. I think having in-house strong solution consulting is critical. Please, if you're setting up a company, don't rely on solution consultants in the States staying up, getting up early or staying up late. It just doesn't work. And then look, most MarTech or e-commerce businesses, get your partner person in nice and early. It will make a lot of difference. You need to have that partner strategy absolutely nailed on. And I think, look, with that, you can do an awful lot before you start to think about hiring anybody else. You know, ancillary departments can be serviced elsewhere, customer success, support, obviously engineering and product. You don't need to worry about where that is really. So I would say you can do a lot with, you know, an initial team of 4 or 5 people, dare I say it. And as a leader, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't, you know, be in the field. Critical, absolutely critical, especially for an early stage business. You need to be in the field for that first year or two, because how else are you going to learn, you know, being in the trenches with the guys? And I think the other lesson I've learned is, for international expansion, look, there's kind of a trifecta that seems to have worked for a lot of companies: a partner person, a really senior AE, and potentially an SE. If you're lucky, get an SDR in region as well. But the SDR can be somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see that quite regularly, that sort of pod system. Yeah.
That's right.
Dovetails quite nicely into one of the other questions. But I guess, given what you've just said there, do you have a strong view on France, Germany, maybe Southern Europe, having people on the ground, or are you somebody that maybe thinks that can be somewhat serviced from the UK?
Yeah, I've actually done both. So I've had people on the ground. I've had people on the ground do really, really well. I've had people on the ground not do so well. I've had a situation where we pulled it all back to the UK. So I've sort of seen every aspect of it. I think the most successful teams have always been local, in my experience.
Yeah.
That is the reality. You know, I know no one really wants to admit this because it costs lots more money and hiring is challenging, and you've got to really, really understand the local market. But there's no substitute for having good people, but it's about that hiring. You know, you can have a team of 3 in Italy servicing Southern Europe. You can have a team of, you know, 4 or 5 in Germany. Whatever the number is, you can do a lot of damage with those guys. But I think the localizations and the colloquialisms and the geographical and cultural nature of these places, it just means you're never going to do as well if the European team is all based somewhere else. You know, you have to acknowledge it. You know, you can get by. There are very successful companies that have got by with just a very large team in London, for example, that's got language ability, but it's hard.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just quickly go through a couple of questions just around that hiring and sort of insights from yourself in that area. Firsthand, even in today's market, the war for talent in EMEA is pretty fierce, right? You know, there's lots of candidates on the market. Some are very good through no fault of their own. How do you go about trying to hire the best possible people? And are there any tips that you can give our listeners who are looking to build teams and doing that right?
Yeah, I think look, as a leader, your number one skill should be your ability to hire well. Like, I will say that consistently, no matter what company I'm at. You've got to refine your skills at hiring. Some people are, by their very nature, very good at it. They're good at reading people. They're good at sifting through what a good background looks like on paper, on LinkedIn or a CV. Some people need a lot more help with that. So my advice is, if you have an internal recruiter, work very closely with them to sketch out what you think an ideal profile looks like. And then search very, very closely for that, or work with an external recruiter like yourself, Simon. So make sure you have a very clear vision of what you think good looks like, and be really strict with that. Okay. I think once you have a hopper of candidates, the screening process is really, really critical. Personally, I like to do a lot of screening calls myself. It's not that I don't trust recruiters, but I think certainly for more senior hires, it can be just quicker that way. And firstly, you're taking a step out of the process by doing it that yourself, but you're also, as I said when I was talking about selling the vision, you can get somebody to believe in your company much quicker if you, as the leader, make that first call. I believe candidates really appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the process, be really clear with the process from the beginning. I've seen this all too often in the past 6 months where companies have been really confused about what their own process looks like. They've changed the process at the 11th hour. They've maybe gone through lots of steps with people and then decided not to hire. I think that's just poor for the candidate. It's poor for all the people in the company who've been involved with that interview process. So work out early what you're going to do, okay, and stick to that. And also see if you can work through that process quickly and efficiently, because my God, that makes a difference. Clients and candidates really, really notice that, and they will believe in your company more if you appear to be efficient, organized, and swift. And then I think the other thing to do, particularly for AEs, is be rigorous with your final interview. The best versions that I've used have been where the role plays have been very well understood by the candidate, but also by the interviewees. Playing a certain character, all of that stuff. It's hard, particularly European hiring teams struggle with it. Role playing is not something that people find natural or easy, and it is a lot harder than reality in many cases. But I do think you need to put people under that kind of pressure to see how they deal with it. And then back channel like crazy. Not enough people do this. You've got to back channel like crazy, and take those back channels with a pinch of salt. Not everybody's going to give you the truth, good or bad. But do your own back channeling and really, really, really make sure your subjective view of that person is correct. Look for it's very easy if you like a candidate to only view the good things. To make sure that you're looking at the negative things as well. But also, if a candidate doesn't come across that well, give them a chance. Maybe they've had something go wrong that day, or deal's gone sideways. So have a balanced view. Be subjective.
Yeah. Okay. Looking forward, future states, you're obviously sort of at the tip of the spear on a lot of these conversations. Mm-hmm. I'm personally very curious, I'm sure the listeners are too. What's your viewpoint on the rest of 24, and then if I dare, 25, 26 in our space?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be a tough year again. I look at where investment money is coming from to give me a sort of a leading indicator in terms of how that's going to trickle throughout the industry. And look, I was at a meeting with a VC the other day, and Series A money is coming back in to play.
Great.
Not many transactions are happening, but they are happening, which is a great sign for all of us. Series C money is extremely rare still, but the indications are the second half of this year we're going to see some more flow in that state. And I think that is what a lot of us have been looking for, because it just shows this sort of freeze state that we're in right now. It has to end at a certain point. There's a lot of great ideas out there. There's people who want to create businesses or want to kick on. So I think it will be another tough year, but I think by the end of the year, we're going to see a lot more opportunity and companies, moving through those stages a bit more. But look, I would say profit versus growth at all costs is here to stay.
Yeah. I think that's been a consistent thing from when I speak to other guests about that question, but it's really promising to hear that early stage investing, it seems a little bit more fluid,
Mm.
which is great. Certainly not like it was maybe, but hopefully there's a little bit more movement. Okay, well, look, last question from my side. For anybody sort of moving into first line or second line leadership roles, if you could bestow any wise words to those people, what would they be and why?
Yeah, look, I think, gosh, there's so much you could say here. I'll try and be succinct. I think know what kind of leader you want to be. That's really important for me. Having your own set of values, being authentic to your true self is absolutely critical if you're going to be a good leader that is respected by peers and can drive results. I don't know how to do it any other way, but I do see first time managers or people moving up the tree struggle when they're trying to emulate other people too much or copy a certain style that isn't natural to them. So I think that would be my number one piece of advice. It's important that we have different leaders out there, different styles and different personalities. And I welcome that. We're not all cyborgs. We're not necessarily all inspirational. We're not necessarily all numbers driven. There's a million different styles that you can do this. So I think do what's true to yourself, and then you'll be the best version of that.
Great. Okay, cool. Right, we've got a few little quick fire questions just to finish this off. I don't know if you've seen any of the other episodes, Michael, but so first question that comes into your head, please. No thinking too much about this. Okay. Favorite piece of tech or app you are using now?
Oh gosh. Can this be anything, or does it have to be professional?
Anything. It could be anything, and you'd be surprised on some of the answers.
Yeah, I'll go with MyFitnessPal because I am looking to get fit this year, because I'm looking at calories a lot.
Getting the Ibiza bod ready, like it. iOS or Android?
Oh, iOS.
iOS. Night at the disco or night at the restaurant?
It used to be the disco. Now it's definitely the restaurant.
Okay. Favorite food?
Oh God. There's too many. I'll go with my favorite in the last 2 months, which was an amazing baked Lebanese cauliflower, which sounds very random.
Oh wow!
It was unbelievable.
Okay, cool. Favorite movie?
That's too hard, Simon. Again, it changes every week. I'll probably go with The Shawshank Redemption, but that's a cop-out.
No, all good. If you were to describe yourself in 2 words, what would it be and why?
Energetic, authentic. Hopefully I don't need to explain.
No, you don't. Favorite place that you visited on holiday or just generally visited in your life?
Mauritius was pretty special.
Yeah, cool. If you have one, what's your guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. I think it's eating a bowl of ice cream and finishing the whole thing, which I've only done a couple of times.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, great. There's some funny ones that come out after that one, I must admit. Ice cream's fairly neutral, so you got away with it. Okay, great. Hey, look, thanks for being such a good sport and obviously sharing all those brilliant insights. It's been great to kind of spend a bit more time with you, obviously hear a bit more about your story. I'm sure that will resonate really well with our guests. If look, for people that aren't connected with you or don't really know you, but got value from that want to get in touch, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I do have a very long second name, so it's Michael Schirrmacher. If you search even vaguely, you should come up with me pretty quick. That's my main kind of go-to on the socials. So yeah, and I do get back to everybody that writes to me. So
okay, that's great to hear. Look, we'll tag you in the post when it goes live. Thanks again for taking the hour with us. Really appreciate all your thoughts and your inputs on that. Thanks, Michael.
My pleasure. Happy to help.